There's so many people living in bodies that feel unpredictable, tense, and even unsafe. They've been told it's just stress or hormones or something they just have to live with. But what if your body isn't failing you? What if it's actually trying to protect you? Today's conversation is one I've been really looking forward to because we're diving into a part of health that's often overlooked, misunderstood, and honestly, rarely talked about in a way that actually feels helpful. We're talking about pelvic health, but not just from a muscle or exercise standpoint. We're looking at it through the lens of the nervous system and how our bodies respond to stress, how they hold tension, how they protect, and sometimes how they shut down. I'm joined by Karla Ehlers, a pelvic health occupational therapist and the founder of Occupelvic Health and Wellness. Her work is rooted in meeting people exactly where they're at and helping them understand the deeper connection between their nervous system, their pelvic floor, and their everyday lives. In this episode, we talk about why strengthening alone isn't always the answer, how chronic stress and pain show up in the body, especially with endometriosis, and most importantly, what you can actually start doing to feel safer, more connected, and more supported in your body. This is a conversation that I think so many people need to hear. Whether you've been dealing with pelvic pain, navigating endometriosis, or just feel disconnected from your body in ways you can't quite explain, this one's for you, so stick around. Welcome to Endo Battery, where I share my journey with endometriosis and chronic illness while learning and growing along the way. This podcast is not a substitute for medical advice, but a supportive space to provide community and valuable information so you never have to face this journey alone. We embrace a range of perspectives that may not always align with our own, believing that open dialogue helps us grow and gain new tools. Join me as I share stories of strength, resilience, and hope, from personal experiences to expert insights. I'm your host, Alana, and this is Endo Battery, charging our lives when endometriosis drains us. Welcome back to Endo Battery. Grab your cup of coffee or your cup of tea and join me at the table. Today, I'm joined by Karla Ehlers, a pelvic health occupational therapist and the founder of Occupelvic Health and Wellness. Karla's work goes beyond just the physical side of pelvic health. She focuses deeply on the connection between the nervous system and the pelvic floor, and how our everyday lives, stress, and routines shape how our bodies function and feel. She's helped thousands of individuals navigate things like pelvic pain, dysfunction, and disconnection from their bodies, all through a really holistic, compassionate lens. What I love about her approach is that it's not about the quick fixes. It's about meeting people where they're at and giving them tools that actually support real, lasting changes. Please help me in welcoming Karla Ehlers to the table. Karla, thank you so much for sitting down with me today and taking the time to share your passion and your expertise with us, because I know that this is going to help someone out there today, and I've been looking forward to it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here and how we connected at the Endo Summit this year. We had just a great time. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. You got in the introduction to the chaos crew, is what I like to call us. We have a lot of fun. That's, I guess, the perk of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get started, we like to go over what is your drink order of the day?
Yes, I have a tea today. Has slippery elm and marshmallow root in it. It's like really good for our digestion. So that's what I'm drinking.
You would have something good for digestion, which we'll get into in just a second here. And then I have Twangs, like the tea, came out with refreshers recently, and they're just like a mixed refresher with like little chunks of freeze-dried mangoes and peaches and stuff. Super tasty. So
That sounds good.
yeah, it's a good summer treat that isn't full of like junk. It's just tea, which is nice. So
Just tea.
that's my order for the day. Before we get started fully on everything that you do, everything that we've kind of gone over a little bit previous to this, is who are you? Let us know who you are, how you got into this space as an occupational therapist for pelvic floor, because this is an interesting thing that I have not covered yet. So the more we get to know about you and how this started, that would be great.
Yeah, so I'm Karla Ehlers, and my background is an occupational therapist since 2014. So I've been in the medical system for a while now, and I started my own business, Occupelvic Health and Wellness, a few years ago, just wanting to get out of the system of, the chronic dysregulation within the whole medical field, and starting my own online business, helping women to overcome chronic pain, and just really seeing how the medical trauma that so many women go through, from the gaslighting, the invalidation for so many years of trying to get diagnosis, of not being believed, and just not getting the right referrals. And so that's really what I want to see. My voice is helping women to get the expert eyes on them quicker, just like a lot of women in this space, or like with Endo Battery and a lot of the other advocates. I do see myself not only as a therapist, as a coach, but also like your biggest advocate, because
Yeah.
I'm going to be there for you to make sure like the other people in the medical system are doing their job, right? Because that is so frustrating when a lot of my clients and patients, they know their bodies more than the doctors in the medical
Mhm.
system, and just having that validation, that confidence to say, no, like this is actually what's going on, and this is the plan and care that I deserve. And so that's kind of a gist of what I do. And I got into this kind of just in my own journey of, not with endometriosis, but with chronic pain. But in high school,
Mhm.
my mom took me to see a mental health therapist when I was like in early high school. Didn't have any confidence, no self-esteem. And I went to one therapist meeting and out of town, and I was like, I'm never going back. There was just so much fear about that already. And so I've kind of created my therapist rapport with my clients based off of that. Like, this does not have to be some fear provoking
Yeah.
session and relationship. And so a few years later, I ended up having a back injury, and just going to like the
Mhm.
actual physical therapy and seeing some improvement. But there's just so much more to pain, not pelvic
Yeah.
pain, back pain. Just there's so much more to pain than just the physical tissues. And so the pain is a sensory and emotional experience. That's truly the definition of pain. And so we have to address the sensory system. We have to address the emotional system, and all
Yeah.
of that is an interplay within pain and the nervous system. So um, it's kind of a different approach. And then, we talked about kind of digestion already. I had my gallbladder removed. So, just like going through my own issues with that and not having any guidance or anything years ago. And I met a lot of women at the Endo Summit that we were sitting at a table, and there were five of us that all had our gallbladders removed. I'm like,
Mhm.
like it's a very
Yeah.
more it's a correlation that I don't think a lot of people realize yet, that there are a lot of digestive issues, and outside of just the common endobelly bloating, right? There's
Right.
deeper rooted digestive issues that are further exacerbating the inflammation and dysregulation within the body.
Mhm. Yeah. One of the things that you and I previously had talked about was the fact that in what you do, you like to meet people where they're at. What does that look like in the practical setting?
Yeah. So meeting someone where they're at, it means not technically, because I do mostly work online, right? But
Right. Yeah.
meeting them at where they're at, and just really truly seeing what is meaningful to you.
Mm.
What is impacted by your chronic pain, by the trauma you've been through, and what do you want to get back to doing? It's not always just about the exercises, right? Like that's a
Right.
tool. That's a tool,
Right.
but what is meaningful to you, and how can we grade different activities back, or make it change the pacing and change the your environment to help that those meaningful activities, and really break it down to see you know taking it like baby steps, I guess, is what we could say. So truly just saying what is meaningful to you and what do you want to get back to. And for a lot of women with endometriosis, jobs are affected, which means you're not making as much money, which causes us to have even more stress, right? And so,
Right.
what I'm really passionate about is helping women prepare and recover from these excision surgeries so that you can get back to work and make a living and feel confident in yourself, because that's something that's not talked about enough, is like the
Nope.
financial piece of, when you can't earn a living for yourself, just that alone is dysregulating to our nervous system, because you
Yeah.
are in constant fight or flight, or like, where's my next paycheck going to be coming from? And so, I know there's some kind of talk about different, like, getting on disability and different things like that, which that could be helpful for some, but that is extremely limiting, and
Right.
I don't want women to feel like that's their only option like, is getting on disability, like, how can we work through this and figure out what kind of occupation, what kind of job can be geared towards your strengths,
Right.
right? What
Yeah.
strengths do you have? Because within a lot of the groups on social media, and you know, we're sharing about the pain and the frustrations and all those
Mm.
things. But sometimes we do need to take a step back and be like, okay, you are a whole person.
Yep.
What are your strengths? And it's so hard when there is so much chronic pain and the trauma, like, all those things can get kind of pushed down and be hard to find. So it is kind of like an onion, peeling that back and kind of rediscovering yourself, especially
Right.
after excision, when pain does start to improve, but you find yourself searching, like, oh, is it going to come back? It's like that's trauma. Is that shadow trauma that's hidden, like, kind of in the back of your
Yeah.
head, and just always wondering if it's gonna come out, like, that is trauma, and, working through that is not talked about enough.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, before I had met you, I really hadn't thought about, like, the OT side of pelvic pain and the nervous system. And I think, like, what's really common is that we kind of separate care and of the nervous system and care of the pelvic floor or pelvic floor dysfunction, we tend to like separate those two things into two different categories. And I think what's interesting is when I met you and when we talked about this, you combined the two. It's not just a musculoskeletal issue, it's not just a nervous system dysregulation issue. They kind of go hand in hand a lot of times. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that and why this matters so much and combining those two efforts?
Yeah, I mean, your pelvic floor is an anticipatory function. And so when
Right.
you have some sort of stress response or trauma, any like, that's going to tighten. And so we
Right.
can do all the exercises and trying to relax, but when there's something in your environment, whether it's within your relationships, with work, within inner turmoil, inner dysregulation, if those
Yeah.
are coming up within your environment, that's going to cause stress somewhere in your body. And when there's already, some susceptible trauma within the pelvic area, there's already pain there. Our brain are already guided to tighten there, because that's been your response, and it's a protective response.
Mhm. You and I had kinda done a call before this, and we were talking about that and, like, how much of our fears and our freeze and our flight modes and all of that really translate into not only your whole body, but, like, I really felt in my core, like, in my pelvic floor, when you have a minute to disassociate from some of these things that stop you in your path and cause you to, like, get in that sympathetic system even more, when you have time to downregulate that or more upregulate your parasympathetic system, it, releases that tension that you're holding on to. Like, it's amazing to me when we worked on that, just how much I was holding in the pelvic floor, and there were, like, simple things that we could do that you walked me through, but it was interesting that I didn't put that connection together of how much we hold in our pelvic floor. And then on top of that, if you have pain and you have trauma within that, I imagine like a lot of times our automatic response in that scenario is to tighten that, is to protect and to guard. And when that happens, then we see the fallout through our whole body, not just our pelvic floor, but everything in our body. And it translates back into the brain. It feels like a circle, like that cycle, that
Yeah,
hamster
it's a
wheel
pain
effect.
the pain cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When we get into that mode, are what are some, like, practical tools that you like to use for people that are in that state of heightened sympathetic system and we are tense everywhere, which I tend to be quite often, and I don't even realize I'm doing it.
So, the first thing, and then we had talked about this, is that functional awareness. We
Yeah.
have to have awareness around something before we can truly make some sort of change, right? And so, just being able to be like, wow, I am getting a little upregulated. I'm feeling more anxious and driven. And one thing that a lot of people don't talk about is like we do need some of that fight or flight to get through our day. That gives us that energy, you know? So it's the same as with inflammation. Both like fight or flight inflammation, it gets kind of a bad rep, but we need both of those things to have homeostasis within our body. So, but it's identifying and noticing that shift within ourselves. So maybe for some people, a lot of the women I work with, especially if they have pelvic floor dysfunction, it's that
Yeah.
tightening within the pelvic floor. Maybe it could be tightening in the jaw
Mhm.
or in the upper abs. That was me actually. My upper abs, I was an upper ab gripper. We're just holding on, trying to suck it in, looking good, right? And or
Yep.
maybe in our glutes. A lot of people hold a lot of tension in their glutes. So it's kind of identifying and bringing some mindfulness to your daily activities of, maybe I'm just sitting here waiting for a doctor's appointment, but I'm so nervous and I'm literally squeezing my glutes. And
Mhm.
can we bring some awareness to that or wherever you're at, whatever
Right.
daily thing is causing you stress? Maybe for some moms it's children screaming,
Mhm.
and that's something we can get into too, is this part of our nervous system, you know is that auditory processing. And so
Mhm.
even that can make us feel even more into dysregulation without even realizing it. So it's kind of noticing subtle changes within our body before it gets to 10 out of 10 pain. And
Right.
so there's a term, it's called interoception. And this is where we can have like identifying sensations within our body of hunger, needing to go to the bathroom, pain. And when there is chronic pain, any kind of neurodivergence, interoception is it's kind of diminished, or it's either it can be hyper aware
Right.
to a point where it's hard to even identify other sensations that are happening within the body. So it's kind of that finding that happy medium of, can we bring some mindfulness to the body outside of just pain,
Yeah,
right?
and that's what was interesting, like, when you and I were talking about this, is that was completely unaware of the fact that those little things, especially with that divergent piece, like, how much I was holding on to just those little pieces, and I didn't recognize that. Like, you had asked me, you're like, "What is something that really gets you going?" Like, in that mode, and I was like, "I honestly don't know. I feel like I'm good most of the time." And then I started thinking back and walking through that with you, and I was like, "Oh, okay. This is what you mean." It's like little triggers, especially if you're neurodivergent, like where you hold on to things and ruminate on a lot of these things, and your body is like telling you, "Okay, we're holding on and we're gonna fight this for you." But it's like almost to the extreme and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. And a lot of that, can be with so much frustration within the medical system, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of it is outside of your control, and you're trying to even just call to schedule an appointment. You're on hold forever, and then you just end up giving up. So it's like, it's all of that on top of it, too, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
being able to have different systems to say, okay, that's not happening today. I'm going to try tomorrow. And, you know, is your brain and your nervous system, is it perseverating on those too much, and how can
Right.
we um you know bring in some different tools to help not distract, but it's kind of that deep retraining of, okay, taking it off of my plate here, we're moving on to something new that's nourishing for my system.
Mhm. What are some cues for that functional awareness though? Because I think there's probably a lot of people that are like, what does that even look like? How can we tell from those little things when we don't take the time to like really sit and be maybe as mindful because we're going through our day, right? Like we are a lot of times even just surviving through our day. So what does that functional awareness look like practically?
Well, I might ask you that.
Okay. I don't know all the time. That's
Right.
truly one of the things that I'm really working on is like what does that look like for me? And
Yeah.
I think a lot of times for me, I recognize it probably more in my upper traps. Like I can feel this motion of my shoulders going up and that tension and I if I find myself, like, reaching back and, like, massaging my upper traps more and things like that, I can feel that, and then a lot of times for me, if I were to stop and really think about it, I think for me, it's noticing my inability to fully take deep breaths. Like, that's something
Mhm.
that I feel like is really hard when I'm holding on to that tension is, like and I don't like, again, I don't recognize in myself that I'm holding on to that. It's if I stop and think about it, then I'm like, "Oh, I can't really take a whole deep breath without wanting to hyperventilate." You know?
Mhm.
So maybe
Yeah.
that's for me, that's been one of those signals and cues, but I think it's probably
Well,
different for everyone.
and for you, from things that you shared, I would encourage you when you are turning inward, right? With
Right,
focusing on that breath. Maybe the deep breath isn't something that is really safe for your body. And this is why
right.
an individualized approach is so important because we can talk about taking those deep breaths, but you know, for someone who maybe is hypermobile and has some
Ah,
different deficits, that alone can feel unsafe. And so
yeah,
I like that you brought up like hiking the shoulders because those upper traps come up. And so if you think about it, if your shoulders are coming up, what do you think your pelvic floor is doing?
right,
It's also likely coming up and tightening. And so I
right.
like to when if you notice that, first go into it with bring them up even more and then you can feel the release as you come back
Mhm,
down. So if you
mhm.
note it and and so maybe this could be like when you're driving, are you tense like this because, it is kind of
You're driving.
stressful because you're
Yeah,
driving, but can you bring some body awareness during that? Or,
right,
another like just picking an activity that you're doing a lot. Like a lot of women are washing dishes if they have kids, like
right.
what can you be doing while you're washing dishes that's nourishing for your nervous system to just stay present? And so kind of maybe
Mhm,
focusing on the weight bearing in your feet or
right.
feeling the sensation of the water on your hands, bringing some grounding approach to these daily activities.
Yeah, and that something you brought up was like the hypermobility piece. So to put this in perspective, that deep breath sensation, for me, I have what they call slipping rib syndrome, which is essentially where my ribs slip out of place when I stretch or take a deep breath. So, like, if I'm on all fours and I'm doing like a cat cow, or if I'm doing taking deep breaths and on all fours, trying to get that inflation into my chest, a lot of times my rib will slip out, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. So, I think there's a lot of times that taking that deep breath can cause that fear. So that's kinda like what we were talking
Mhm.
about, like, it causes that tension, and I think that's something that for me, as someone who's hypermobile, that's a really hard thing to break, is that fear of hurting myself, the fear of causing more pain or harm to my body, because our bodies are so unpredictable. For those people that have those really unpredictable bodies who tend to be a little bit more bendy or even can flare just in the simplest ways, are there tools or tricks that can be helpful for those people who can't maybe identify when something's going to happen right away because our bodies are unpredictable?
Right. So for that in particular, I would encourage you to play with maybe different positions, maybe providing more support to the ribs. So
Okay.
maybe hands and knees breathing wouldn't be as supportive as maybe if you were positioned on your back where the
Right.
back part of your ribs were more supported from on the ground. Seeing if maybe taping could help have some compression there to make that feel a little bit safer. Um, so that's just what I can think of for that particular, scenario. It's
Mhm.
really it's trying different things, but just changing and pacing it a little
Mhm.
bit, because when we do try to change things too much, we're like, "Okay, I don't really know what
Right.
was helpful." And
Right.
so that is that slow, controlled pacing piece that is very important so that we can adapt to figure out what actually is supportive and feeling safe for your body.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you work with people as well to help feel safe in their bodies again for that unpredictable body? Because, like, as someone who has for a long time not felt safe, like, our bodies are throwing us for a wingding, if you will, pretty frequently. And so it's that feeling of like, and I think this is where that gets into that nervous system dysregulation too, right? Like, where we just don't feel safe in our bodies anymore. We don't
Mhm.
know what it's going to throw at us. We don't know, like, why things are happening the way they are. And so I think with that, for me, I recognize like that's probably causing some of that dysregulation within my nervous system. How do we
Mhm.
combat that? Like, as people where that's a constant battle.
Yeah, I immediately think of when I'm coaching women on feeling safe within their bodies,
Yeah.
particularly in preparation for excision surgery,
Yeah.
because ideally I would like to work with women before surgery so you can have a baseline of what movements do feel good for you, because after
Yeah.
excision, we don't want to be throwing new exercises and movements at you. You want to already know, like, oh, this one feels really good for me. This is my
Mhm.
go-to, right? And
Right.
so that's why I'm really proactive about getting women before surgery so we can work on those calming techniques and retraining that system so that after surgery, when we have that clean slate because your surgeon got rid of all that tissue, right? And we can move forward versus constantly back on the internet. Oh, what should I do now?
Mhm.
Like, and just having that support. And so feeling safe within your body is so individualized because your experience with the slip rib, like, that's not the
Yeah.
same for everybody, right? And so this
Right.
individualized approach really, especially when it comes to nervous system healing, it's more than just different tapping strategies and different
Mhm.
humming. Like, those are all vagus nerve toning strategies to help our vagus nerve. But if your system is still having unsafe feelings outside
Yeah.
of these strategies, like, what else is it? Like,
Yeah.
what else is going on?
Yeah. Well, and if anyone's like me, I like predictability. Like, I like to know what
And our
works.
nervous system loves predictability. Yes.
Yeah. And I feel really unsettled when I don't know what's going to happen. I think that's where, for a lot of us, like, that's where that dysregulation comes from is just not knowing. Right. And I think, especially if you're neurodivergent, if you're ADHD, autism spectrum, there's a lot of times that the unknown is frightening, and it creates a lack of trust within our bodies in and of themselves. So knowing that there is a baseline, that there's that home base, right? Like, there's that predictable place that you can lean on, I think has got to be helpful. I wish I had that in my excision surgery. I was literally like floundering in the wind, I felt like, because I had no idea A, what I was doing, but B, I just didn't really know how to cope with my new reality post excision. For me, obviously I had my excision surgery, hysterectomy, and all of that. So hormones were off on top of that. So everything was just chaotic in my mind. And I think that the healing process was much harder because of that. And so I wish I would have had like that safe space going back to my journey. But good news is that it's never too late to get back to that place of
Yeah.
like safety and security, right?
Yeah. You're creating it for yourself now, you
Yeah.
know?
If someone is listening and realizing, this might be me, what's the first place that they can start?
Well, like we said, kind of having that functional awareness for
Yeah.
themselves, and first just noticing when you are becoming dysregulated. And when we talk about the nervous system, a lot of people know fight or flight. That's that
Right.
sympathetic nervous system. That's that upregulation. You're feeling anxious, stressed. But when we get to that tipping point, we're going down into overwhelm and hopelessness. And
Yep.
that's on the opposite end of this nervous system spectrum. And that is called dorsal vagal state. And so we kind of need to understand that when we're up here and we're fight or flight, we're going on, we need something grounding to bring us down.
Mm.
But when we're in hopelessness and, that part of depression, we need something to mobilize out of that. Right?
Right.
And so for
Right.
both of these, there's a third piece to our nervous system. It's called ventral vagal state. And that's where um, we use other people's nervous systems, that socialization piece. And that's why I love group training and group support group. But for me, like group retraining, like truly using other people's nervous systems to help yourself. And so when we're all the way up here, we need to be mindful that, okay, what are some grounding activities to help bring me
Mhm.
down? And when we are down here, when we're feeling hopeless and in that depression, what are some safe movements to bring you out of that?
Mhm.
And so how can you incorporate the socialization? Because
Right.
there's another term, it's called co-regulation, and that's when our nervous systems are speaking with each other. And so even right now between us,
Mhm.
through eye contact and through having nice facial expressions, these are
Right.
all really soothing for our nervous system. Because I don't know if you've noticed, if you've walked into a doctor's office and the front desk lady or even the doctor just comes in and you can tell they don't give a crap, and
Right.
your nervous system feels that. Right?
Yes.
That is co-regulation. You can feel that. There's another term, it's called neuroception. Our body is always scanning for safety,
Mhm.
always. And
Mhm.
so when we do have that soft eye contact, that those nice facial gestures, that is telling our nervous system that this is safe. And
Yeah.
so this is really important to understand with your spouse, your partner, family members, and it's frustrating for women who do experience chronic pain and endometriosis. A lot of them feel like their families don't understand, and
Mhm.
so this is where that piece of co-regulation is really important. And if you don't have that within your family or your relationship, that's why my group is important. That's why other groups are important, right? So you can
Right.
find that validation, that nervous system safety with other people, because nervous system healing cannot happen alone. That's one of the
Oh, yeah.
foundational pieces of nervous system healing. Is it cannot happen alone. We have to have another nervous system to help us to co-regulate. And that's where some of this, when chronic pain can be exacerbated through stress, when you do have maybe a fight with your spouse, if we don't understand that those two nervous systems are communicating together, um, then that's going to further cause that cycle, that dysregulation.
That's fascinating. I never knew that it part of, like, healing that dysregulation is being in community with others. Like, I always knew that was so important to me, when we started Endo Village, it was like one of the things that we really grasped onto is the fact that we were in this community together. We knew it was healing, right? Like we have this sense of it. We feel it. We know that we feel better once we're done. And it's so funny that you mentioned that because it was like there's so many times where I am tired, I am feeling even overwhelmed and I don't really like want to go sometimes if I'm being honest. And I
Right.
get there and I'm so like there's something about being in that community of people who get it, who've been there themselves, when we're laughing and we're sharing jokes and, whatever the case is. And then I come home and yes, I'm tired because that I'm so like full. Like it's been a lot, but it's also been so healing to sit in space with these people. And I just never put the fact that that is tied to my nervous system as well.
Yeah, it is.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
there's science behind it. Yes.
Well, and I knew there was, and I don't know why the 2 dots did not connect that there's an actual term for this and that there's like, I knew there was science, but it wasn't like I didn't realize how much it was personally doing for my nervous system and how much your nervous system needs that. Like,
Yeah.
it's restorative to be in
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to have community who does have a strength-based approach, because there
Yeah.
are a lot of the groups online, on your Facebook feed, if something's popping up every day of someone sharing their pain. And, a lot of women, especially if they're neurodivergent, there's a lot of empathy and you can
Yeah.
feel those feelings. And so that's kind of being brought up too. So being mindful of that environment on your phone, like if there is a lot of turmoil that keeps popping up in your visual field,
Hmm.
that's dysregulating alone. So really finding a space that is a strength-based approach for your healing.
Yeah. Well, and that's like one of those things that I always tell people. I'm like, online support groups can be really helpful, but also like in person, just that actual touch and that face to face is so powerful to be in community with people. Like,
Like at the Endo Summit, right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
In just like the laughter that comes from it that you would not get that online. Like it just as hard as you could try, you would just feel like you're talking over each other all the time. And but you think about going and having a seat at the table with multiple people and how fun that is. Yes, it can be overwhelming for those of us who have sensory issues sometimes, but in the right context, I think that just allows your body to just take a breath sometimes too. If it's
yeah,
the right scenario, the right group of people.
yeah,
Could be
yeah,
the opposite for some situations,
right.
but in general, yeah, like the Indo Summit, it was like we sit there and we laugh, but we laugh about the things that sometimes bring us pain, right? It's not that we're necessarily dismissing or diminishing the pain. It's that we're using that pain and laughing at kind of the things that we've gone through. And for me, that's healing to just
Yeah,
know that many of us have gone through it and we can laugh about some of that stuff.
yeah. And
So,
I wanted our conversation we had, we're talking about the spoon theory. And I
yeah.
wanted to chat with that about you because your analogy was really, really insightful.
Yeah, so the analogy so I have a hard time to be fair, this podcast's name kinda was based off of this spoon theory in the sense that, like, we only have so much to give. How do we recharge? How do we get some of those spoons back type of thing? But the spoon theory hasn't really served me well in my mind. My mind doesn't connect with it as well. I just have a harder time picturing it and understanding it and then living that out. And so, one of the things that we had kind of talked about, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, is that I think of in the chronic illness space, I think of it like this. If there is a buffet, many people can grab just like a normal dinner plate and fill it, right? And they kind of know when to stop and they know like they have enough room to taste all the things. For chronic illness, we have a 6-inch plate as opposed to like a 12-inch plate. So we have to be super mindful about what we put on our plate before everything kind of just gets one big blob and it starts falling off and it gets overwhelmed and it starts overflowing and the taste of it isn't as good because it's mixing green beans with peaches, like it just doesn't mesh well, right? And so in my mind, as chronic illness people, we have to be mindful of our smaller plate and add what's really important, but we also need to add like the sweet spot, right? Like we need our nutrients, we need our nucleus, the things that keep us going, but we also need to have the ability to have that thing that fuels our soul, those sweet things that we crave as well. But it may not be a big piece, it may be something small, as long as we're getting a little bit and not overflowing our plate. So that's kind of like what I think of is the buffet plate. Like, how much can you carry on your plate and how big is your plate? Ours just, I feel like, is much smaller than typical people's
Yeah.
plate is. So,
Yeah, I like that a lot, and part of me does has some skepticism about the spoon theory too, because let me tell you why. It is an energy conservation technique, right? So we're trying to
mhm,
figure out how to best conserve energy physically, right? And
right,
so we're figuring out how many spoons you need to take a shower, to go to the grocery. But just because you are physically resting and watching TV or whatever you are doing for resting,
right.
how do you know your nervous system is not already spiraling? because that can take
Yeah.
so much energy already. And
Mhm.
that's what I see a lot is that we're trying to save all this energy for physical activity, but so much energy can be consumed when we are sedentary and spiraling, right?
Yes.
That's going to take just as much energy. So creating those spoons for yourself, but also realizing bringing that functional awareness piece to, okay, I am resting here, but is my nervous system truly at rest? And what
Right.
could I do to try to find some peace within myself
Yeah.
to save some of that energy, some of that energy that I need to have the focus to do the hard phone call, to create,
Right.
all these executive functioning things that have to happen within our brain. They
Mhm.
they do take energy, but a lot of that energy gets gets taken away when we are kind of silently spiraling, right?
Yeah. Well, and I actually think that's so true because there are a lot of times that people fuel themselves by being active. So it's not necessarily the active, I think, as much as it is like that emotional cognitive battery, if you will. Because I think there's a lot of times that I may not be as physically active, but I am exhausted
Yeah.
emotionally and mentally. And it does create a physical exhaustion. But if I get out and I start moving my body, then I feel more energized. I feel like I can give more to the things that are important to me, whether that's my family, whether that's my work, whatever the case is. Like there is an element to that that I think it's more than just physical. It's that bandwidth, right? Like it's your capacity in any way that is, whether that's physical, emotional, mental. And you and I kind of talked a little bit about this because there are times that in my brain, I have a really hard time accomplishing things if I feel overwhelmed. And I think a lot of us on um, any sort of spectrum, it it's really hard for us to organize the things that we need to do and prioritize things when it feels like it is a mess everywhere. And that's kind of what I mean by like having what you can carry on your plate. Because I
Hmm.
do think that there's that piece of it where everything just gets muddled and everything feels overwhelming and you start spilling over in every area of your life. And for me, like if I'm not aware and if I'm a list person, like I need to make my lists to make sure that I'm like accomplishing things. But then if I don't accomplish those things, I am automatically in this heightened state of like freak out, and that wrecks my nervous system too. So there's like so many different components to this. And that's why that individualized care makes such a difference. But I know so many of us struggle with this is like, it's not just physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's all of those things put together, create that plate. So I like that perspective on that. Can you share with us just 2 to 3 simple tools to help regulate the nervous system? So we've kind of talked a little bit about the tapping and the breathing and things like that, but what are like couple things to help regulate our nervous system that also help our pelvic floor?
Right. So we talked about the functional awareness and kind of seeing where you are holding that tension.
Right,
And so this is where it comes to be individualized because when we're trying to bring in um, ways to kind of hack your nervous system, it's like what kind of sensations do feel good for you,
right.
right? And so someone might like compression versus maybe a light touch. And
Yeah,
so kind of doing what we like to get into, it's like a sensory profile and we have to figure out what sensations are regulating to your nervous system. And so a
right.
lot of people can really identify with I have pain with this, like maybe in my sciatic, right?
Mhm.
And so outside of that, what sensations do feel good for you,
Mm,
right? And
right,
so what movements feel good? And
right.
so kind of switching your mindset to searching for things that are regulating to your body and do feel good and that nourish your body. And so that
Mhm.
might take a little bit of what we call like sensory exploration. And so
Yeah,
creating a little sensory toolkit for yourself. Maybe it's a vibrator, maybe it's a feather, maybe it's a soft piece of fabric.
Mhm.
What are things that do feel good to your body that you can start exploring?
Yeah. Those are, like, really practical things. I don't remember there was one session we talked about this at the summit, having, like, that sensory tool bag that remember who it was that carried them with them, where they had, like, the things that they knew that they would need, whether it was, like one of the things that set them back sensory-wise was maybe having dirty hands, so they had, like, a clean wipe in their sensory pack,
The
or maybe they had earplugs if it was gonna be too loud, or maybe it was, the dryness on their lips is always gonna be something that they're like, "I hate this, I can't stand
Yeah,
it, it's, like, it's triggering," so they always have, like, chapstick. Whatever that is, like, having a fidget, that can definitely help in your regulation throughout the day, just little things, doesn't have to be big all the time. Because the reality is, like and maybe you can speak to this, like, the reality is that we can't always stop and take these massive breaths and be as mindful when we're in the middle of, New York City traffic, like,
right.
it's not always achievable to do, like, mindful stuff, so, like, having those sensory tactile things
Yeah.
are helpful, I think.
Yeah, definitely some sort of like little fidget. Like, honestly, I have a little fidget right now that I've been playing with this whole time. So,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So, just kind of creating your own self care toolbox, whether that's for sensory, whether that's for movement, whether that's
Mhm.
for, your own mental health. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah,
not just about physical exercise, which that's very important. Like, don't get me wrong, like we all need that, right? But
right.
there are steps before you can create that for yourself, especially when there is so much chronic pain and guarding and just like I have a lot of women who they want to retrain their core,
Yeah,
but immediately when they start to do exercise, get bloated the next day. So we have to take
mhm,
it slow because when you do exercises, especially for the core, it
mhm,
is kind of that compressing, it's that spinal movement. And when you are similar to like a lot of women, when they're in pain, they go into that fetal position, right? And
mhm.
so, kind of seeing if you're in that fetal position because you're in chronic pain, moving your spine in that direction as well is that underlying dysregulation for you.
Mm,
I don't know.
I don't know.
So it's
I
like those
yeah,
types of things, like looking at the patterns that your body has just innately gone to, and
yeah.
how can we switch the pattern a little bit to create safety within your body.
Yeah, and we had talked about just a little bit ago meeting people where they're at, but what does that look like when people are dealing with severe pain? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, if you meet me where I'm at, I'm going to be in that fetal position. How do we get them out of that and meet them where we're at in those situations?
So I mean, that's kind of back to our sensory toolkit. If you're in that
Yep.
fetal position, you're noticing the pain, what could feel better for you?
Mm,
What could
yeah,
it be? Could it be compression? Could it be changing the location, your environment?
yeah,
Could you go outside? So it's changing different parameters to get your brain and body out of that loop.
yeah. Something that you and I had kind of talked about was for me, going back to like talking about things that I like to hold on to that are small. So this is like the pain thing. And you were like, you take it and you put it in this box or in this window and you just like kind of release it. You push it off. Like, does this matter right now? And one of the things that I realize that I oftentimes do in the pain scenarios for me that have been really helpful is that I have to talk to myself and say, am I in danger? Is there a threat around me? Am I capable of moving my body this way? Am I capable of taking a sip of water? Am I capable of feeding myself right now? And so like I walk through a lot of those things and, like, self-talk those things through so that I can bring myself back into this reality. Because sometimes I will work myself up emotionally and mentally into a realm that's not even realistic to what's actually around me. Like I create a space that isn't as healthy or safe for myself. But if I'm allowing myself to regulate my space sometimes, I feel like my nervous system can then regulate as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you shared that. Thank you for sharing that because a lot of like when there is so much chronic pain, it's like your brain is just like, "Oh, this is here again," right? Like,
Yeah.
"Here it is again, here it is again." And so that self-talk is important because they do create better endorphins within your body, right?
Yeah.
And better messages that you're sending, those better beliefs about yourself. And
Hmm.
so, it's hard because it is a struggle,
Right.
but when it becomes more natural and when you start to retrain those patterns, your nervous system's going to start searching for those patterns versus the negative patterns.
Right. Right. And that's not to invalidate the pain. That's to help
No.
identify what's actual pain and what's your nervous system firing too much. Like there is a difference there, or not firing, but how your brain perceives that pain. For just these quick last few seconds here, we're going to do a few quick questions, rapid fire, that may be helpful. Um, One thing you wish every woman knew about their body.
One thing I wish every woman knew about their body is that they are what they want it to be, right? They can
Yeah.
become whatever they want to be. And when there is so much chronic pain, it can put us into a bubble of creating these false beliefs about ourselves. And so I want every woman to know about their bodies that there is healing. There can be the right approach to overcome your chronic pain and that um, you are strong.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Okay. Most misunderstood symptom of pelvic floor dysfunction.
The most misunderstood symptom of pelvic floor dysfunction, I would have to say we didn't get into this too much. Maybe this could be for another conversation, but
Yes.
gut health and our
Yeah.
digestion, like all of that is connected. So if there is dysregulation within the gut, the pelvic floor is going to follow suit too and also be dysregulated. So those two are definitely connected.
So that will be another episode because I think that's going to be a big one for us. So if people have
Yeah.
questions, they got to let me know
Yeah.
because we should touch on that. Daily habit you swear by.
A daily habit I swear by is getting up and spending time for myself in the morning. Because when
Mm,
there is dysregulation, nervous system dysregulation, the first thing that we lose is our own self-care rituals. And so what are the rituals that you need to create for yourself to be intentional for your healing?
mhm.
And I can tell on days when I don't get up and do something for me in the morning, I'm dysregulated all day. It really does set the tone for the day, even if it's just for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I like that. Something people are doing that you would maybe gently say, maybe stop doing.
Well, Kegels for one.
Okay,
But I
goals,
think
yes.
I feel like that's a trend people know that, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
I
think
feel
you're
like
getting there.
that's been out in the social media, like don't do Kegels. So, breath holding our breath.
Mm,
That's
yeah.
just going to keep us in this state of dysregulation. So I know we talked about like the shallow breathing for you, but
Mhm.
there's more work to be done for your breathing system to help you to feel safe. But
Yeah.
yeah, breath holding, because that does not only for our nervous system, but when we are lifting something, when you're picking up your kid, if you're holding your breath, that's just putting so much pressure down on the pelvic floor. So you're at an increased risk of having a prolapse, leaking, um,
Mhm.
just different things like that. So breath holding is definitely one.
Oh, these are all really good. Like, I'm like, there's so much we can expand on this,
Oh yeah.
but so much. Like, that's why I'm like, this is such a unique space that I feel like you're in. And I hadn't really realized there was this space for a really long time. So I'm really glad that we were able to meet and kind of go over this. But if someone's listening and feels disconnected, frustrated, or even betrayed by their body, what would you want them to hear as our last remarks?
Well, I would encourage you that your body is just trying to protect you. It
Mm,
really is, and
yeah.
it's adapting to the environment that you're in. And so what is going on within the relationships, within your environment, within your medical providers that aren't helping you to create that safety for yourself?
Yeah.
And if there's some red flags there, then that's where we need to start.
Yeah, I hear that. If this episode resonated with you, I hope that you are walking away with just a little bit more understanding and maybe just like a little bit more compassion for your body and for you and the work that you've been doing and hopefully the healing that you have because this has been helpful for me. Just meeting with you and understanding more is giving me better tools and better recognition about myself and my journey. So I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your expertise in this. And I want to have you back because we should talk about more of this stuff. It's so
Yeah,
fascinating to me.
let's do
So
it. All right. Well, we'll schedule it. So, all right.
thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
And until next time, everyone, continue advocating for you and for others.